Billionaire fires pregnant assistant. 7 years later, her son ruins his wedding. The boy was halfway down the aisle before anyone thought to stop him. 300 guests turned in their seats, champagne flutes frozen mid-toast, silk dresses rustling. The string quartet stopped playing, their bows hovering over strings, the last note hanging in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. And there he was, 7 years old, dress shirt untucked on one side, shoes scuffed from the bus ride across town, walking toward the altar like he had every right to be there. The groom saw him first, Victor Ashford, 43 years old, net worth somewhere north of $2 billion. The kind of man whose face appeared on magazine covers with words like Visionary and Titan printed underneath. He stood at the altar in a tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars, watching a child approach with an expression that started as confusion and ended as something closer to terror, because he recognized that face, those brown eyes, that stubborn jaw, the way the boy held his chin up even though his hands were shaking. Victor was looking at himself, 20 years ago, 35 years ago, a mirror walking toward him in a too-big shirt and second-hand shoes. The boy stopped 10 feet from the altar. The bride, a woman named Genevieve whose family owned half the vineyards in Napa Valley, clutched her bouquet like a lifeline. The minister took a step backward. Somewhere in the back of the room, someone's phone was already recording. And then the boy spoke, "You're my father." His voice carried clear across the silent ballroom. Not loud, not angry, just certain. The way children state facts they've spent years figuring out. "And you left us." The bride made a sound like she'd been slapped. Victor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. The boy kept going. "My mama works 3 jobs because of you. She doesn't eat dinner some nights so I can have seconds. And you're here in your fancy hotel, marrying someone else like we never even existed. 300 people, 300 witnesses to the destruction of a perfect life, phones rising like flowers turning toward the sun, screens glowing, fingers tapping." And Victor Ashford, who had built an empire on knowing exactly what to say in any room, who had closed billion-dollar deals and charmed senators and convinced entire boards of directors to follow his vision, stood at his own wedding altar and said absolutely nothing at all. If you've ever wondered whether the past can catch up with you, whether the choices you bury can claw their way back to the surface, this is that story. Stay with me until the end. You're going to want to see how this unfolds. 7 years earlier, Diana Mensa found out she was pregnant on a Tuesday afternoon, in the executive bathroom of the 53rd floor, during her lunch break. She sat on the closed toilet lid for 11 minutes. She counted. 11 minutes of staring at a plastic stick, watching the second line appear, waiting for it to fade or reveal itself as some kind of mistake. It didn't fade. The line stayed pink and certain and completely indifferent to the fact that it had just detonated her entire life. She was 29 years old, executive assistant to Victor Ashford for 3 years, in love with him for most of that time, though she'd only admitted it to herself recently, sleeping with him for 14 months, though nobody at the company knew that. Nobody could know that. That was the rule, Victor's rule. Discretion above everything. Diana understood. She'd grown up in Flatbush, daughter of Ghanaian immigrants, watched her father work himself to death driving a taxi while her mother cleaned houses in neighborhoods they could never afford to live in. Diana had clawed her way through City College on scholarships and waitressing shifts, had landed the job at Ashford Capital through sheer persistence and a willingness to work harder than anyone else in the room. She knew how the world worked. She knew what people would say about a black woman from Brooklyn sleeping with the white billionaire CEO. She knew the whispers that would follow her, the assumptions, the way her entire career would be reduced to a single ugly word, gold digger. So she'd kept the secret, cherished it even, the late nights when everyone else had gone home and Victor would close his office door and become someone different, softer, funnier. The way he'd order Thai food and eat it cross-legged on his office floor while telling her about the pressure his father put on him, the impossible standards, the loneliness of being the heir to an empire nobody had asked him if he wanted. He made her feel special, chosen, like she was the only person who got to see the real him. "I've never been able to talk to anyone the way I talk to you," he'd said once, tracing his finger along her collarbone while the city lights glittered beyond his window. "You make me feel like a person instead of a brand." She'd believed him. That was the thing she'd never forgive herself for. She'd actually believed every word. Now she sat in that bathroom stall, pregnancy test in her trembling hand, and tried to imagine telling him, tried to picture his face when she shared the news. He'd be surprised, obviously, maybe scared at first, but then, she thought, then he'd smile. He'd pull her close and tell her they'd figure it out together. Maybe this would be the thing that finally pushed them out of the shadows. Maybe this baby, their baby, would be the beginning of something real. She washed her hands, fixed her makeup, straightened her blouse, and she walked to his office. His assistant, technically her own subordinate, waved her through without looking up from her computer. Diana had always found that ironic. She was the executive assistant to the CEO, which meant she managed his calendar and his correspondence and his life, but she also had an assistant of her own for the overflow, layers upon layers of hierarchy, and she'd somehow ended up tangled in the most complicated layer of all. Victor was on a call when she entered. He held up one finger, smiled at her, kept talking into his headset about a merger that needed to close by Friday. His voice carried that authority she'd always found attractive, the tone that commanded boardrooms and bent competitors to his will. She waited by the window, looking out at Manhattan. 53 floors up, the city looked clean and organized, all straight lines and geometric patterns, nothing like the chaos of the streets below, where people rushed and struggled and fought for scraps of success. "All right," Victor said, ending his call. He pulled off his headset and turned to her with that smile, the private one, the one that made her knees weak. "Hey you, I was just thinking about dinner tonight, that place you like, the one with the handmade pasta. I made a reservation for 8. I'm pregnant." She hadn't meant to say it like that. She'd had a speech prepared, something gentle and measured, giving him room to process. But her mouth had other plans. The words just fell out heavy and final, landing between them like a grenade. Victor's face did something complicated. The smile faded, his eyes went flat. And then, so quickly she almost missed it, something flickered across his features that looked almost like annoyance. "That's not funny, Diana. I'm not joking." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the test, set it on his desk right next to his Mont Blanc pen and his leather-bound calendar and all the other expensive accessories of his expensive life. He stared at it, didn't touch it, looked at it the way you might look at a dead rat someone had placed on your desk. The silence stretched. Outside, Manhattan continued its indifferent glitter. Diana could hear her own heartbeat, loud and wrong, filling up the space where his joy was supposed to be. "Well," Victor said finally. His voice had changed, colder now, more careful. "That's unfortunate." The word hit her like a slap. "Unfortunate, you know my situation." He stood up, buttoning his jacket, creating distance. "My father's on the board. The Whitmore merger is in a delicate stage. I can't afford any complications right now." Complications. He'd called their baby a complication. "Victor, this isn't a business problem. This is us. This is our child." He looked at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that she'd never seen before: calculation. The same cold assessment he probably used when deciding whether to acquire a company or let it die. "There are options," he said carefully. "Clinics, discreet ones. I'll cover everything, obviously. And a severance package, generous, enough to start over somewhere. It's the cleanest solution for everyone." Diana felt the floor shift beneath her feet. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be the same man who had held her face in his hands and told her she was different, that she wasn't like anyone else, that she made him feel alive. "You want me to get rid of it. I want us to be realistic about our situation." "Our situation?" She heard her voice rising but couldn't stop it. "Victor, I love you. I thought you loved me." Something flickered in his face again. Guilt, maybe. Or just irritation at having this conversation at all. "Diana," he said. And his tone was patient now, the way you might speak to a child who didn't understand something obvious. "What we had was nice. It was fun. But you had to know it was never going to be anything more than that." The words carved through her chest like a knife. "What are you talking about? Come on." He actually laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You're a smart woman. You know how this works. Did you really think I was going to marry you, take you home to meet my father, introduce you at charity galas as Mrs. Victor Ashford?" Each question was a wound. Each question was 7 years of belief bleeding out onto his expensive carpet. "But you said," she started. "I said what I needed to say." His eyes were cold now, reptilian. "You were good company. You were convenient. But if you think I'm stupid enough to let some," he paused, chose his next words carefully, "let some secretary trap me with a pregnancy, you're more naive than I thought." Some secretary. Not Diana, who had reorganized his entire filing system and memorized his allergies and once stayed at the office until 3 in the morning to help him prepare for a presentation that saved a failing acquisition. Just some secretary. "This baby is yours," she said, her voice shaking now. "You know it's yours. You're the only person I've been with in 2 years. Victor's expression hardened. "I don't know anything of the sort, and neither does anyone else." He straightened his cuffs, a gesture she'd once found endearing, now revealed as the nervous tick of a man preparing to lie. "As far as I'm concerned, we never had any kind of personal relationship. You were an employee, nothing more." The denial was so brazen, so completely shameless, that for a moment Diana couldn't breathe. "You're lying." "I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. Victor, please." She stepped toward his desk, reaching for him, desperate to find some crack in this sudden wall of ice. "Just think about what you're saying. This is your child, your flesh and blood. You can't just pretend." He moved away from her reach, circling around his desk to press a button on his phone. "Security to my office. Now." Diana's blood went cold. "What are you doing what I should have done months ago?" His voice was flat, business as usual. "You're terminated, Diana. Effective immediately. Clear out your desk and leave the building. You can't do this." "I can do whatever I want. I own this building, I own this company, and as of 30 seconds ago, I own your professional reputation." He met her eyes, and there was nothing there. No love, no guilt, nothing but the cold arithmetic of a man protecting his assets. "Try to contact me again and I'll have you arrested for harassment. Try to go public and I'll bury you in lawsuits you can't afford to fight. Do you understand?" The office door burst open. 2 security guards entered, faces professionally blank, hands ready at their sides. "Ms. Mensah is no longer employed here," Victor said, not looking at her. "Please escort her out." "No." Diana's voice cracked. "Victor, wait. Just listen to me." She moved toward him, and one of the guards stepped between them, gentle but firm. "Ma'am, please come with us." "Victor, please." She was crying now, couldn't help it. The man she'd loved, the man she'd trusted, was watching her fall apart with the detached interest of someone observing a stranger's misfortune. "This is your child. You can't just throw us away like garbage." He didn't respond, just turned to his computer screen and started typing, as if she'd already ceased to exist. The guards led her out, past the assistant who couldn't meet her eyes, past the row of junior executives who had gathered to watch, their faces bright with gossip and barely concealed excitement, past the glass walls of offices where people she'd worked with for 3 years suddenly found their documents very interesting. The whispers started before she reached the elevator. "Did you hear what she said? The secretary was sleeping with him, claimed she was pregnant. Can you believe it? Trying to trap him, obviously. I always knew there was something off about her. Each word was a nail in her coffin. Each whisper was the sound of her reputation being shredded in real time." The elevator doors closed, and Diana began her descent, not just to the lobby, but into a future she would have to face completely alone. In her purse, the pregnancy test remained, a small plastic stick that proved nothing and everything, evidence of a love that had been real to her, even if it had never been real to him. The lobby was marble and glass and indifferent beauty. The security guards walked her to the front entrance, one of them kind enough to mutter sorry as they passed through the revolving doors. And then she was outside, standing on 5th Avenue in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, unemployed and pregnant, and completely, utterly destroyed. She made it 2 blocks before her legs gave out, found a bench near a construction site, sat down hard and let herself cry, really cry. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than sadness, that scrapes against your chest and leaves you hollow. People walked past without stopping. This was New York. Everyone had somewhere to be. Diana sat there until the sun started to go down, until the tears dried up and something harder took their place, something that felt like resolve. She put her hand on her stomach, still flat, no sign yet of the life growing inside her. "Okay," she whispered to the baby who couldn't hear her yet. "Okay, I guess it's just us now." She stood up, straightened her clothes, started walking toward the subway that would take her back to Brooklyn. Victor Ashford had thrown her away like she was nothing, but she wasn't nothing, and neither was her child. Whatever it took, however hard it was, she would survive this. She would build a life. She would raise this baby to know they were loved, to know they mattered, to know that their worth had nothing to do with a father who had chosen money over them. The subway platform was crowded and smelled like urine and exhaust. Diana stood at the edge, watching the tracks, waiting for the train that would carry her into an uncertain future. She was terrified, but she was also, in some strange way, free. 7 years, she thought. That's how long it would take for her past to catch up with her. 7 years of struggle and survival and sleepless nights. But she didn't know that yet. Right now, all she knew was that she was alone and pregnant and about to fight harder than she'd ever fought for anything in her life. The train came. The doors opened, Diana stepped inside, and her new life began. The first year was the hardest. Diana's mother let her move back home, into the 2-bedroom apartment in Flatbush where Diana had grown up. The bedroom she'd shared with her younger sister until Amara got married and moved to Atlanta. The twin bed that was too small for her growing body. The walls still covered with posters from her high school years, faded remnants of dreams that felt impossibly distant now. Her mother didn't ask many questions. Gloria Mensah had survived her husband's death, had raised 2 daughters alone while working double shifts at the hospital, had weathered enough storms to know when to push and when to simply provide shelter. She just made up the small bedroom with fresh sheets, started cooking larger portions of jollof rice and Contomeyer stew, and let her daughter cry when she needed to cry. "I don't understand how a man can do this," Gloria said one evening, watching Diana push food around her plate. "After everything you gave him, he never saw me as a person, Mama." Diana's voice was flat with exhaustion. "I was just convenient, just there." Gloria shook her head. "In Ghana we have a saying, 'The rain does not fall on one roof alone. His day will come.'" Diana wanted to believe that, but right now all she could think about was getting through tomorrow. The job hunt was brutal. She had 3 years of experience as executive assistant to a major CEO. She had glowing performance reviews, meticulous references, a resume that should have opened doors. But somehow every interview ended the same way. "We'll be in touch." They never were. It took her 6 weeks to figure out what was happening. She'd applied for a position at a hedge fund, made it through 3 rounds of interviews, was told she was the top candidate. Then nothing, silence. When she called to follow up, the HR director's voice had changed. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mensah. We've decided to go in a different direction." Diana knew what that meant. She'd made some calls of her own, reached out to former colleagues who still owed her favors. The word came back quick and ugly. Victor had blackballed her. Every reference call, every background check, every whispered inquiry about Diana Mensah came back poisoned. Words like unstable and unreliable and inappropriate conduct followed her like a shadow she couldn't shake. He was thorough, she had to give him that. He'd destroyed her career as efficiently as he'd destroyed her heart. So she took what she could get, cleaning offices at night, 4 hours after the executives went home, scrubbing toilets and vacuuming carpets in buildings that reminded her painfully of where she used to work, waitressing at a diner in Park Slope, memorizing orders and forcing smiles at customers who never looked at her face, stocking shelves at a grocery store that paid $8 an hour and didn't ask questions about her past. 3 jobs, 4 hours of sleep a night, a growing belly that made everything harder. Her mother helped when she could, but Gloria was 63 and still working part-time at the hospital. The medical bills were already piling up. Prenatal care wasn't cheap, and Diana's insurance had evaporated along with her career. The baby came in March. A snowstorm had shut down half the city. Diana went into labor at 2 in the morning, contractions ripping through her body while the wind howled outside and the buses stopped running. Her mother called an ambulance that took 45 minutes to arrive. By the time they reached the hospital, Diana was dilated to 8 centimeters and screaming into a pillow. 19 hours of labor, 2 hours of pushing, a team of nurses whose faces blurred together into a haze of pain and fluorescent light, and then, finally, a cry. They placed him on her chest, this tiny, wrinkled, furious creature who had just fought his way into the world. Diana looked into his scrunched-up face, felt his small hand curl around her finger, and something inside her shifted permanently into place. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, baby. I'm your mama." He opened his eyes, brown like hers, like Victor's, though she tried not to think about that. She named him Miles, after her father who had died when she was 12, who had worked himself to death trying to give his family a better life. Her father who had never gotten to meet his grandchildren, who would have loved this baby with everything he had. Miles Isaiah Mensah, her son. Those first months were a fever dream of exhaustion, night feedings every 3 hours, diaper changes at 2 in the morning, hands clumsy with fatigue, Miles wailing in the dim light of their tiny bedroom. The constant low-grade terror that she was doing everything wrong, that she wasn't enough, that this beautiful child deserved so much more than she could give him. But there were other moments too. The first time Miles smiled at her, a real smile, his whole face lighting up with recognition. The way he'd fall asleep on her chest, his breathing slow and trusting. Complete faith in this woman who had no idea what she was doing. The sound of his laugh, which arrived around 4 months and became the best sound Diana had ever heard. She went back to work 6 weeks after giving birth. There was no choice. The bills kept coming whether she was bleeding through her clothes or not. Her mother watched Miles during the day, then Diana would race home between jobs to nurse him, to hold him for a few precious minutes before heading out again. She learned to function on fragments of sleep, learned to eat standing up, shoving food into her mouth between tasks, learned to compartmentalize the exhaustion, to push it down into a place where it couldn't touch her. By the time Miles was 2, Diana had been living this way for so long it felt normal. 3 jobs, the rotation of childcare between her mother and a neighbor who charged $30 a day. A 1-bedroom apartment in a building where the heat worked only half the time and the hallway always smelled like someone else's cooking. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Miles grew into a serious child, watchful, curious. He taught himself to read at 4 by studying his mother's lips during bedtime stories, sounding out words until they made sense. He asked questions constantly. About everything. Why is the sky blue, and how do birds know where to go, and what happens to people after they die? Diana answered as honestly as she could. She believed in truth, in treating her son like a real person even when the truth was hard. But there was one question she couldn't answer honestly. "Mama," Miles said one night, tucked into his small bed in the corner of their room, his space shuttle nightlight casting blue shadows on the wall. "How come I don't have a daddy?" Diana's chest tightened. She'd known this question was coming, had practiced her answer in the mirror, trying to find words that were true without being cruel. "Some families have a mama and a daddy," she said carefully, "and some families are different. Our family is me and you and Grandma Gloria and Auntie Amara in Atlanta. That's our family. But where is he?" Miles pressed. "My daddy. Where does he live?" "He lives far away, baby." "Does he know about me?" Diana hesitated. The truth sat heavy on her tongue. Yes, Victor knew. He'd known since before Miles was born, had chosen to pretend his son didn't exist, had never sent a card or a check or even an anonymous gift. "He wasn't ready to be a daddy," she said finally. "But that's not your fault. Some people just aren't ready." "Will he ever be ready?" The hope in his voice nearly undid her. "I don't know, sweetheart, but you have me, and I love you enough for 10 daddies." Miles seemed satisfied with this answer. He curled up under his blankets, already drifting toward sleep. But Diana lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, hating Victor Ashford with a fury that scared her sometimes. Not for what he'd done to her. She'd made peace with that, or something close to it, but for what he was doing to this beautiful boy, this child who deserved to know his father, this innocent kid who asked questions Diana couldn't answer. 7 years of this, she thought. 7 years of scraping by and making do and lying to her son about why he didn't have a daddy like other kids. She didn't know then that the 7th year would change everything, that Miles, her cautious and curious and stubborn child, would take matters into his own hands. That's coming. But first, we need to talk about how a 7-year-old became a detective. Miles was 6 years old when he found the photograph. He was looking for his winter gloves, rummaging through the closet his mother kept full of things she couldn't throw away. Old documents, tax returns, a box of keepsakes from a life she didn't talk about. The photo was tucked into a folder labeled work stuff, a company party, dozens of people in business clothes, fake smiling for the camera. And there, near the center, was his mother, younger, happier, her hair styled differently, her dress nicer than anything Miles had ever seen her wear. And next to her, with his hand resting casually on her shoulder, was a man. Miles stared at the photograph for a long time. The man was tall and handsome, with dark hair and brown eyes and a smile that looked practiced, like he knew people were watching. Brown eyes, just like Miles. He studied the man's face, then looked at his own reflection in the closet mirror. The same jaw, the same nose, the same way their eyebrows went up when they were thinking hard about something. Miles was 6, but he wasn't stupid. He knew what this meant. He put the photograph back exactly where he'd found it. He didn't mention it to his mother. But he started paying attention to things he'd never noticed before. The way his mother flinched whenever rich people came on TV. The way she avoided certain parts of Manhattan, certain subway stops, certain conversations. The way she sometimes stared out the window at night with an expression that looked like sadness mixed with something harder. He started watching business news. Not because he understood it, but because he was looking for something, someone. A face that matched the one in the photograph. It took him almost a year to find it. He was 7 years old, sitting on the couch doing homework while his mother worked her evening shift at the grocery store. His grandmother was in the kitchen, humming along to gospel music on the radio. On the TV, a commercial break ended and the news came back on. And there he was. Tech billionaire Victor Ashford announced today that he's engaged to Genevieve Marchand, heiress to the Marchand wine empire. The wedding is scheduled for September at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. Miles's pencil stopped moving. The man on screen was older than in the photograph, his hair touched with gray now, but it was definitely him. The same face, the same practiced smile, Victor Ashford. His father had a name. Miles grabbed his grandmother's tablet, the one she used for video calls with Auntie Amara, and typed the name into the search bar. Pages of results, magazine interviews, Forbes profiles, photos of Victor at charity events and business conferences and fancy parties. Always smiling, always surrounded by important-looking people, always alone, no wife, no children, no mention of Diana Mensa, no mention of a son. Miles read until his eyes burned. He learned that Victor was worth $2 billion, that he ran something called Ashford Capital, that he lived in a penthouse on the Upper East Side that was worth $30 million. $30 million. His mother skipped dinners sometimes so Miles could have seconds. She wore shoes with holes in them because new shoes cost money they didn't have. She worked 3 jobs and slept 4 hours a night and still couldn't afford to buy him the telescope he wanted for his birthday. And his father lived in a $30 million apartment. Miles closed the browser and put the tablet back where he'd found it. His grandmother hadn't noticed anything. The gospel music kept playing. The smell of dinner drifted from the kitchen. But something had changed in Miles. Something hard and certain had taken root in his chest. He was going to find his father. He was going to make him explain. And then maybe things would finally be different. The confrontation with his mother happened a week later. Miles waited until his grandmother went to bed, until it was just him and Diana in their small living room. The TV muted, the city humming outside their window. I know who my father is. Diana's hands stopped moving. She'd been folding laundry, one of the endless tasks that filled her few free minutes. Now she sat frozen, a pair of Miles's small socks clutched in her fingers. What did you say? His name is Victor Ashford. Miles kept his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. He's rich. He runs a company called Ashford Capital, and he's getting married on Saturday to someone named Genevieve. Diana's face went through several expressions: shock, fear, and then something that looked like grief. Miles, baby, I found the picture. The one in your closet. You were at some work party and he had his arm around you. And he looks just like me, Mama. Everybody online says how handsome he is and we have the same eyes. Diana set down the socks. Her hands were trembling. How long have you known? I found the picture last year, but I only figured out his name a few days ago. A year. Her son had been carrying this weight for a year and she'd had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? Miles looked at her with those brown eyes, Victor's eyes, full of hurt and confusion and a desperate need to understand. I wanted to be sure first, and I wanted to figure out what to say. He paused. Why doesn't he want me, Mama? The question shattered her. She pulled Miles into her arms, held him tight while they both cried. He was getting too big for this, his legs dangling awkwardly, but she held him anyway because she didn't know what else to do. And then, because he deserved some version of the truth, she told him. Not everything. He was 7. He didn't need to know about the affair, about the ugly words Victor had used, but she told him the bones of it, that she had worked for Victor, that they had been close, that when she found out about Miles, Victor had been scared and made a bad choice. People get scared sometimes, she said, and when they're scared, they do hurtful things. Are you ever scared? All the time, baby. But I don't let it make me hurt you. Miles was quiet for a while, processing. Then he looked up at her with determination in his face. I want to meet him. Diana's stomach dropped. No, absolutely not. But Mama, he doesn't want to meet you, Miles. He made that very clear a long time ago. And I won't let you get hurt like that. But what if he changed? What if he's been looking for us this whole time and couldn't find us? He's a billionaire, Diana said quietly. If he wanted to find us, he could have found us. Miles's face crumpled. The hope that had been building in his chest, the fantasy he'd been nurturing for a year, collapsed under the weight of that simple truth. So he really doesn't want me. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a child understanding something terrible about the world. Diana held him tighter. "I want you," she whispered. "I want you more than anything in this whole world. And that has to be enough, baby. It has to be." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. A mother's love, no matter how fierce, couldn't fill the hole left by a father's rejection. Miles would carry that wound forever, would always wonder what was wrong with him that his own father didn't want him. She hated Victor for that, hated him with a fury that felt bottomless. But hatred didn't change anything. It didn't pay the bills or answer Miles's questions or make their small apartment feel less empty. For now, all she could do was hold her son and let him cry. The wedding was happening in 3 days, and neither of them knew yet that Miles had already made up his mind. The night before the wedding, Diana couldn't sleep. She lay in their narrow bed, Miles curled against her side, his breathing slow and even with the peace of childhood sleep. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with its usual nighttime sounds, sirens in the distance, a couple arguing on the street below, the bass thump of music from someone's open window, normal sounds, an ordinary night, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. 3 days had passed since Miles's confession, 3 days of watching her son carry a weight no 7-year-old should have to carry. He'd stopped asking about Victor, stopped pushing to meet him, and somehow that was worse. The silence felt like surrender, like her bright, curious boy had accepted that his father would never want him. Diana had tried to distract him, extra bedtime stories, a trip to the planetarium he loved, ice cream for dinner one night just because. But Miles moved through it all with a strange quiet, his eyes distant, his mind clearly somewhere else. She should have paid closer attention, should have recognized the look on his face, the one that meant he was planning something. But she was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and the fumes of 3 jobs, and she missed the signs. Around midnight she finally drifted off. Her dreams were shapeless and anxious, full of long hallways and doors that wouldn't open. She didn't hear Miles slip out of bed, didn't hear him pull on his good clothes in the dark, the navy pants and white button-down she'd bought him for school pictures. Didn't hear him take the coins from his piggy bank, the money he'd been saving for her birthday present, and put them carefully in his pocket. By the time she woke up, the sun was streaming through the window and the space beside her was empty. "Miles," she sat up, her heart already starting to pound. "Miles, where are you?" The bathroom door was open. The kitchen was empty. Her mother was still asleep in the other room. Diana found the note on the kitchen table, written in Miles's careful handwriting, the letters slanting slightly to the right the way they did when he was concentrating hard. "Dear Mama, I'm sorry, but I have to do this. I have to meet him and ask him why. I'll be careful, I promise. I took the bus, so don't worry. I love you, Miles." For a moment Diana couldn't breathe. Then she was running, grabbing her shoes, her keys, her phone, not even stopping to change out of the old t-shirt she slept in. "Mama," her mother appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the commotion. "What's happening? Where's Miles? He's gone." Diana's voice cracked. "He went to find Victor. The wedding. Oh God, the wedding is today. What wedding? What are you talking about?" But Diana was already out the door, taking the stairs 2 at a time, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The Plaza Hotel, Midtown Manhattan. At least an hour by subway. Longer if there were delays. Miles had maybe a 30-minute head start, but he was 7 years old and small for his age. He'd have to figure out the bus, then the subway, then navigate through a part of the city he'd never been to. Unless he'd already figured it out. Unless he'd been planning this for days. Diana ran. The Saturday morning subway was crowded with weekend commuters, tourists heading to Times Square, families with strollers blocking the aisles. Diana pushed through them all, not caring about the dirty looks, the muttered complaints. Her son was out there somewhere. Alone in a city of 8 million people, heading toward a man who had already hurt him once without even knowing it. She tried calling him, but Miles didn't have a phone. He was 7. She'd thought about getting him one of those kids' watches with GPS tracking, but it was $60 she didn't have. $60. She'd skipped buying safety equipment for her child because of $60. And now he was gone. The train stopped between stations. "Some kind of signal problem," the conductor announced. "Delays of approximately 15 minutes. No, 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 no." Diana pushed toward the doors, ready to walk through the tunnel if she had to. But they stayed sealed, trapping her underground while her son got further and further away. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe, tried to think. The wedding was at noon. That's what the news had said, the coverage she'd been trying so hard to avoid. High society event of the year. 300 guests, security everywhere. Miles would never get in. He was a kid in second-hand clothes. They'd turn him away at the door. Unless they didn't. Unless something in his face, that stubborn determination she knew so well, convinced someone to let him through. Unless Victor's eyes, staring out from Miles's small face, made some guard hesitate just long enough. The train lurched forward. Diana gripped the pole and prayed to every god she'd ever heard of. Please let him be okay. Please let me get there in time. Please. Miles had never been to Manhattan alone. He'd been with his mother a few times on rare days off when she had enough energy to take him somewhere special. The Natural History Museum with its giant dinosaur skeletons, Central Park where they'd fed the ducks and pretended they were rich people who did this every weekend. The big library on Fifth Avenue where Miles had whispered to the stone lions like they were old friends. But he'd never navigated the subway by himself, never had to figure out which train went where, which transfers to make, how to read the signs that seemed designed to confuse everyone. He'd practiced, though, late at night, on his grandmother's tablet studying maps, until the routes were burned into his memory. He knew he needed the 2 train to Times Square, then the N or R to Fifth Avenue, then walk east toward the park. The Plaza Hotel was right there, a big fancy building that looked like a castle from the pictures online. The hard part wasn't the directions, the hard part was being brave. Miles sat on the subway clutching the pole with both hands, watching the stations flash by through the grimy window. Around him, strangers went about their Saturday morning business. A woman with grocery bags, a man sleeping with his mouth open, 2 teenagers laughing at something on a phone. Nobody looked at Miles. Nobody wondered why a 7-year-old was riding the subway alone, dressed in his best clothes, his face tight with determination and fear. That's the thing about New York. Everyone's invisible if they want to be. Miles thought about his mother. She'd be awake by now. She'd have found his note. She was probably scared and angry and already on her way to find him. He felt bad about that. He didn't want to scare her. But this was something he had to do. If he'd asked permission, she would have said no. She would have tried to protect him from getting hurt, the way she always did. But Miles was already hurt. He'd been hurt his whole life, carrying around questions that nobody would answer, wondering what was wrong with him that his own father didn't want to know him. Today he was going to get answers, even if they hurt. Even if his father looked at him with that same cold dismissal Miles had imagined in his worst nightmares. At least he'd know. At least the wondering would stop. The train pulled into Times Square. Miles followed the crowd up the stairs, into the chaos of the city's most famous intersection. Screens flashing, people everywhere. The noise and the light almost overwhelming after the dim quiet of the subway. He kept his head down and walked, found the signs for the N train, got off at Fifth Avenue. And then he was outside, standing on a street corner in Midtown Manhattan, the Plaza Hotel rising before him like something out of a fairy tale. It was bigger than he'd imagined. Gold and white and impossibly grand, with flags fluttering from the rooftop and doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than his mother made in a week. Fancy cars were lined up outside, dropping off guests in clothes that sparkled even in the morning light. These were the kind of people his father belonged to. The kind of people who would look at Miles and see exactly what Victor had seen in his mother. Someone who didn't belong. Someone reaching above their station. Miles squared his shoulders, lifted his chin the way his mother did when she was facing something hard. He walked toward the entrance. The first doorman barely glanced at him. The second one, older, with kind eyes behind his professional expression, paused. "Excuse me, young man. Are you here with someone?" Miles had prepared for this, had practiced the lie in his head until it sounded natural. "I'm the ring bearer." His voice came out steady, confident. "I'm supposed to be inside already, but my mom is parking the car." The doorman's eyes swept over Miles's clothes. Nice enough for a kid in a wedding party, if you didn't look too closely. The white shirt was pressed, the pants were clean. He looked like a child who belonged at a fancy event, even if everything about him screamed otherwise. "The ceremony is in the grand ballroom," the doorman said finally. "Down the hall, follow the signs." "Thank you, sir." Miles walked through the revolving door and into another world. The lobby of the Plaza Hotel was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Crystal chandeliers catching the light, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, flower arrangements taller than he was, white roses and lilies that probably cost more than his mother's rent. Everywhere he looked, there were rich people, women in dresses that flowed like water, men in suits that fit like they'd been sewn directly onto their bodies, children his age who looked at him with vague curiosity before their nannies steered them away. Miles didn't stop to stare, didn't let himself feel small or out of place. He followed the signs to the grand ballroom. his heart pounding harder with every step. The doors were open, music drifted out. Soft strings playing something classical, the kind of music that felt expensive just to listen to. He peered inside. The ballroom was vast, filled with golden chairs arranged in perfect rows. White flowers cascaded from the ceiling. A red carpet ran down the center aisle toward an altar that looked like something from a church, all carved wood and candlelight. The guests were seated, 300 of them at least, their faces turned expectantly toward the front. And there, standing at the altar in a black tuxedo, was the man from the photograph, Victor Ashford, his father. Miles had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In his fantasies, Victor always looked different. Softer somehow. Like he was waiting for Miles, hoping to meet him, ready to explain that it had all been a terrible mistake. But the real Victor just looked expensive, polished and perfect and completely certain that everything in his life was exactly as it should be. The music changed, everyone stood up. Miles realized with a jolt that the ceremony was starting. This was it. His last chance to walk away, to find his mother, to pretend he'd never come here. But he didn't walk away. Instead, he slipped through the ballroom doors, found a spot along the back wall where nobody was paying attention, watched as a woman in the most beautiful white dress he'd ever seen began walking down the aisle toward his father. She was pretty, this woman who was about to become Victor's wife. Blonde and smiling and completely at ease in this world of money and privilege. She looked like she belonged here, like she'd never had to worry about rent or groceries or whether her clothes had holes in them. She looked like everything Miles's mother wasn't, and Victor was watching her with a tenderness that made Miles's stomach hurt. His father was capable of love, after all. He just hadn't wanted to love Miles or his mother. The bride reached the altar. Victor took her hands. The minister began to speak, words about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. Miles felt something building in his chest, pressure, heat, all the questions he'd been carrying for years, all the hurt he'd been swallowing, pushing upward like they were trying to escape. This man had thrown them away, had denied Miles's existence, had let his mother work 3 jobs while he lived in a $30 million apartment, and now he was standing up there promising to love someone else forever. Like Miles and his mother were nothing. Like they had never mattered at all. The minister's voice rang out clearly across the silent ballroom. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The words hung in the air, traditional, ceremonial, the kind of thing nobody ever actually responded to. Miles stepped forward. He was moving before he knew he was moving, walking out from his hiding spot along the wall, heading toward the aisle. A few guests turned to look at him, confused expressions on their faces. Who was this child? Where had he come from? Miles reached the aisle and kept walking. More heads turned now. Whispers started. The string quartet's music faltered and stopped. And still Miles walked, down the red carpet past the rows of golden chairs, past women in diamonds and men in tuxedos who stared at him like he was an alien who had wandered in from another planet. Victor saw him. Miles watched his father's face change, confusion first, then recognition, slow and terrible, as he looked into eyes that were exactly like his own, then fear. Miles stopped 10 feet from the altar. His whole body was shaking now, but he kept his chin up, kept his voice steady. "You're my father." The words cut through the silent ballroom like a knife. "And you left us." The bride stumbled backward. The minister dropped his Bible. 300 guests sat frozen in their seats, witnesses to the unraveling of a perfect life. Victor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know what you're talking about." His voice was strangled. "Security, someone call security." But Miles wasn't done. "My name is Miles. I'm 7 years old, and my mama is Diana Mensah. She used to work for you. You know exactly who I am." The name hit Victor like a physical blow. Miles saw him flinch, saw the color drain from his face. "This is ridiculous." Victor's voice was louder now, desperate. "I've never heard of anyone named Diana Mensah. This child is disturbed. Someone needs to." "You're lying." Miles hadn't meant to shout, but something inside him had broken open. Years of wondering and hurting and pretending it was okay that his father didn't want him. "You threw us away like we were garbage. You told my mama to get rid of me. You had her dragged out by security. You ruined her career so she couldn't get another job." Victor was backing away from the altar now, away from the bride who was staring at him with horror on her face. "You live in a $30 million apartment," Miles continued, his voice raw with fury. "And my mama works 3 jobs. She skips dinner so I can eat. She wears shoes with holes in them because she can't afford new ones. And you're here pretending we don't exist, marrying someone else like we never even mattered." The ballroom was dead silent. Phones were up everywhere, recording. Someone would post this online within minutes. The story would spread. There was no containing it now. "Victor," the bride's voice was shaking. "Victor, what is he talking about? Who is this child?" "He's lying," Victor said. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. "I don't know who put him up to this, but look at his face." Everyone turned. Diana was standing at the back of the ballroom, her chest heaving, her old t-shirt and yesterday's jeans completely out of place among the silk and diamonds. She'd run all the way from the subway station, had pushed past doormen and security guards, had followed the sound of her son's voice. "Look at him, Victor." She walked toward the altar, her eyes locked on the man who had destroyed her life. "Look at his eyes. Look at his jaw. Look at the way he holds his chin when he's scared. That's your son, our son. And you've known about him since before he was born." Victor's face was gray. The mask was cracking, falling away piece by piece. Diana reached Miles and pulled him against her side, one arm wrapped protectively around his shoulders. He pressed into her, drawing strength from her presence, but he didn't look away from Victor's face. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding," Diana said quietly. "My son did that on his own because he needed answers you were never going to give him. But since we're here, since everyone's watching, I want you to know something." She stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "I spent 7 years being ashamed, thinking I wasn't good enough, wondering what was wrong with me that you could throw us away so easily. But I'm not ashamed anymore. I raised this boy by myself, and he is the best thing that ever happened to me. He's brave and smart and kind, and none of that came from you. You don't deserve him, you never did." Victor stood frozen at the altar, destroyed in front of everyone who mattered to him. His bride was crying, mascara running down her cheeks. His groomsmen looked like they wanted to disappear. 300 guests were witnessing the end of everything he'd built, and then something unexpected happened. Victor's shoulders dropped, his face crumpled, and in front of everyone, the billionaire CEO began to cry. "I know," he whispered. His voice was broken, barely audible. "I know I don't deserve him." Miles stared at his father, confused by this sudden shift. He'd expected denial, anger, the cold dismissal his mother had described. "Not this, not tears. I was a coward," Victor continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I was 28 and terrified, and I let my fear turn me into a monster. I've regretted it every day since. Every single day." Diana's arm tightened around Miles. She didn't trust this, couldn't trust it. She'd seen Victor lie too many times, had watched him destroy her with words spoken in the exact same office where he now claimed to have suffered. "Regret doesn't mean anything," she said flatly. "Not after 7 years. I know, it doesn't give us back the time you stole. The birthdays, the first steps, the first words, all the nights he asked about you, and I had to lie because the truth was too ugly. I know. So what do you want from us, Victor? Forgiveness? Because you're not going to get it. Not today. Maybe not ever." Victor wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The gesture was clumsy, unpracticed. He probably hadn't cried in front of anyone since he was a child. "I don't want forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve it. I just want." He looked at Miles, really looked at him for the first time. "I just want him to know that it wasn't his fault. None of it was ever his fault. I was broken long before he was born, and I broke you both because I was too much of a coward to be better." Miles felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't what he'd expected. Nothing about this moment was what he'd imagined. "Are you sorry?" he asked. His voice was small, a child's voice, despite everything that had just happened. "Are you really sorry, or are you just saying that because everyone's watching?" Victor flinched. The question cut deeper than any accusation. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to love you. I'm sorry I let you grow up thinking there was something wrong with you. I'm sorry I took the easy way out and left your mother to carry everything alone." He paused, struggling to find words. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that the problem was never you. It was always, always me." The ballroom remained silent. Whatever people had expected when they arrived for the wedding of the year, it wasn't this. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a billionaire brought to his knees by a 7-year-old boy and the woman he'd wronged. The bride, Genevieve, stepped forward. Her dress was wrinkled now, her bouquet abandoned on the floor. She looked at Victor with something between pity and disgust. "I can't marry you," she said quietly. "You understand that, right? I can't marry someone who would do what you did." Victor nodded. He didn't argue, didn't try to explain or justify. "I know." She pulled the engagement ring from her finger, a massive diamond that caught the chandelier light, and pressed it into his palm. "I hope you figure out how to be the man that little boy deserves," she said. "Because right now you're not even close." She walked away, down the aisle past the staring guests, out of the ballroom. Her bridesmaids followed in a confused flutter of silk and whispers. And then it was just Victor, standing at the altar of his ruined wedding, facing the woman and child he'd thrown away 7 years ago. "Now what?" Diana asked. Her voice was tired. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind nothing but exhaustion and the weight of years. "You've said you're sorry. You've cried in front of all your rich friends. Does that make you feel better?" "No." Victor's voice was hollow. "Nothing could make me feel better." "Good." Diana took Miles's hand and started walking toward the exit. She was done with this. Done with Victor and his world and everything they represented. Whatever he'd said, whatever tears he'd shed, it didn't change the past, didn't give them back the years, didn't fill the hole in her son's heart. "Wait." Miles stopped walking. His hand tightened in Diana's grip. "Mama, wait." She looked down at her son, saw the conflict on his face. He was 7 years old and he'd just confronted his father in front of 300 people. He should have been ready to leave, to go home, to process everything that had happened. But there was something in his eyes that gave her pause. "What is it, baby?" Miles turned back toward Victor. His father hadn't moved from the altar, was just standing there, looking lost and broken in his expensive tuxedo. "If I never see you again," Miles said slowly, "I'll always wonder. I'll always think maybe you really were sorry. Maybe you really did want to change. And I'll never know for sure." Diana felt her chest tighten. She knew where this was going, knew what her son was about to ask. "Miles," she started, "I don't want to wonder anymore, Mama. I've been wondering my whole life." He looked up at her with those brown eyes, so much like Victor's, so much like the man who had hurt them both. Can we give him a chance, just one chance?" Every instinct Diana had screamed no. This was Victor Ashford, the man who had called her a gold digger, who had threatened to destroy her if she ever spoke about their relationship, who had watched her be dragged out of his office by security guards while pregnant with his child. But Miles wasn't asking for her. He was asking for himself, for the chance to know finally and completely whether his father was worth anything at all. And looking at her son's face, at the desperate hope mixed with fear, Diana couldn't say no. "One chance," she said quietly. She looked at Victor, her eyes hard. "One chance to prove you're not the man you were 7 years ago. You blow it, you disappear, you hurt him in any way, and I promise you, Victor, I will make what happened today look like a tea party." Victor nodded. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face still wet with tears. "I understand. I don't think you do, but you're going to learn." Diana squeezed Miles's hand and started walking toward the exit again. This time, Miles came with her. At the ballroom door, he paused and looked back one more time. "You can call us," he said to Victor, "if you want, but if you don't mean it, don't bother." Then he turned and walked out of the Plaza Hotel, his mother's hand warm in his, leaving 300 stunned guests and one broken billionaire in his wake. Outside, the September sun was warm on their faces. Manhattan hummed with its usual Saturday afternoon chaos, completely indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded inside. "Mama," Miles's voice was small now. All the bravado drained away. "Did I do the right thing?" Diana knelt down on the sidewalk, not caring about her old jeans or the fancy people streaming past them. She took her son's face in her hands. "You did a brave thing," she said. "Whether it was right or wrong we won't know for a while, but you were brave, baby. Braver than most grown-ups ever have to be. Are you mad at me?" She thought about it. The terror of waking up to find him gone, the frantic subway ride, the moment she'd walked into that ballroom and seen her son standing alone in front of 300 strangers. "I was scared," she admitted. "Really, really scared. But I'm not mad. I understand why you had to do it." Miles nodded slowly. Then he leaned into her, pressing his face against her shoulder. "I'm tired, Mama. I know, baby. Let's go home." She stood up and took his hand. They walked toward the subway together, leaving the Plaza Hotel and everything it represented behind them. But even as they descended into the familiar underground world of trains and crowds and flickering lights, Diana knew this wasn't over. Whatever had happened in that ballroom, whatever words Victor had spoken, the real test was still coming. Anyone could cry in front of an audience. Anyone could say they were sorry when their whole world was falling apart. The question was whether Victor Ashford could change when nobody was watching, whether he could show up day after day, year after year, and be the father Miles deserved. Diana didn't know the answer, didn't know if she'd ever trust him enough to find out. But for the first time in 7 years, she was willing to let him try. That was the day everything changed. Victor called the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for the next week. Diana didn't answer. She let the calls go to voicemail, listened to his halting messages late at night when Miles was asleep. The messages were awkward and unpracticed, nothing like the smooth, confident voice she remembered from his office. "Diana, it's Victor. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't blame you. I just wanted you to know that I meant what I said. I want to try. I want to be better, please. Please just give me a chance to prove it." She deleted most of them without responding, but she saved a few, evidence, she told herself, in case he tried to pretend this never happened. Miles asked about him constantly. Did he call today? Yes. What did he say? The same thing he always says, that he wants to try. Are we going to let him? Diana looked at her son, at the hope that refused to die in his eyes no matter how many times she tried to prepare him for disappointment. "I don't know, baby. We need to be careful, I know." But Mama. Miles paused, choosing his words. "I'd rather find out he's not really sorry than spend my whole life wondering. He was too smart for 7, too wise. It broke her heart sometimes how much growing up he'd had to do." 2 weeks after the wedding, Diana finally called Victor back. She made him meet her in a public place, a coffee shop in Brooklyn, neutral territory, somewhere she felt safe. She told Miles to stay with his grandmother and went alone. Victor was already there when she arrived. He looked different, thinner, tired. The expensive suit had been replaced by jeans and a plain button-down shirt, as if he was trying to be someone other than the man she remembered. "Thank you for coming," he said when she sat down across from him. "I didn't come for you. I came for Miles." "I know." Silence stretched between them. The coffee shop hummed with normal Saturday sounds, people on laptops, friends catching up, a baby crying somewhere near the back. "Why now?" Diana asked finally. "Why do you suddenly care?" Victor stared into his coffee cup. "I've always cared. I just didn't know how to show it." "That's a lie." He flinched but didn't argue. "Fine. I was a coward. I cared about my reputation and my father's approval and my company's stock price more than I cared about doing the right thing. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me. That the baby would be better off not knowing the kind of man I really was. It was easier to believe that than to face what I'd done. And now I've lost everything anyway." His voice was flat. "Genevieve left. My father had a stroke last month when the scandal hit the papers. The board is considering removing me as CEO. Everything I sacrificed you and Miles for, all of it's falling apart." Diana felt something cold settle in her chest. "So that's why you're here. Your life fell apart and suddenly you want to play family." "No," Victor met her eyes. "My life falling apart just forced me to look at it honestly for the first time. I've been miserable for 7 years, Diana. Successful and rich and completely empty. When I saw Miles at the wedding, when I looked into his face and saw myself looking back, something broke. All the walls I'd built, all the lies I'd told myself, none of it could survive that moment." She wanted to believe him. That was the dangerous part. Some small piece of her, the piece that had loved him once, wanted to believe that people could change. But she'd been fooled before. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice hard. "You can see Miles. Supervised visits, public places. I'll be there the whole time. You don't buy him things, you don't make promises, you don't try to be his buddy or his hero. You just show up consistently for a long time, and maybe if you prove you're serious, we can talk about something more." Victor nodded. He didn't argue or negotiate. "Whatever you want, however long it takes, it might take years. I have years." Diana studied his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the manipulation she knew so well. She'd been trained by experience to see through him, to expect the worst. But all she saw was exhaustion, and something that might have been hope. "I won't let you hurt him," she said. "If you disappear, if you ghost us, if you make him feel like he's not important, I will never forgive you. And neither will he. I understand. I don't think you do, but you're going to learn." She stood up, leaving her untouched coffee on the table. "I'll call you next week. We can arrange something." She walked out without looking back. On the subway home she let herself cry. Not because she was sad exactly, but because this was hard, all of it. Protecting Miles and giving Victor a chance and hoping for the best while expecting the worst. She didn't know how this story would end. Didn't know if Victor could really change, or if this was just another performance. Another manipulation dressed up as redemption. But she knew one thing. Miles needed to find out for himself, and she would be there every step of the way to catch him if it all fell apart. The first visit was awkward as hell. A Sunday afternoon in Prospect Park. Diana sat on a bench 20 feet away while Miles and Victor walked along the path together, both of them stiff and uncertain. She watched Victor try to make conversation, watched Miles give one-word answers, his usual chattiness nowhere to be found, watched them both struggle to figure out how to be in each other's presence. It would have been almost funny if the stakes weren't so high. After an hour, Miles came back to the bench alone. Victor hung back near the duck pond, giving them space. "How was it?" Diana asked. Miles shrugged. "Weird. Good weird or bad weird, I don't know yet." He sat down next to her, pressing against her side. He asked a lot of questions about school and stuff. "What did you tell him?" "Just normal stuff. My favorite subject is science. I want to be an astronaut. I like dinosaurs, but I'm starting to like space more." Diana smiled despite herself. "Did you tell him about the solar system poster in your room?" "Yeah. He said maybe he could take me to the planetarium sometime." Miles looked up at her, uncertain. "Is that okay? We'll see, baby. Let's take it one step at a time." Victor approached them slowly, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched like a teenager meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time. "Thank you," he said to Diana, "for letting me see him." "Don't thank me. Prove it was worth it." He nodded and turned to Miles. "Same time next week." Miles glanced at Diana. She gave a small nod. "Okay," Miles said. Next week, it wasn't much. A single awkward hour in a park, no breakthroughs, no tearful confessions, no movie moments where everything suddenly made sense. But it was a start. Over the next few months, those Sunday visits became a routine. Victor showed up every week without fail, rain or shine, hot or cold. Even when Diana could tell he was exhausted or stressed or dealing with whatever chaos was happening at his company, he brought himself. That was all. No expensive gifts, though Diana could see him restraining himself sometimes when Miles mentioned something he wanted. No promises of vacations or fancy experiences. No attempts to buy his way into Miles's heart. Just time, just presence, just showing up. Miles started to thaw. His one-word answers became sentences. His sentences became stories. By the third month, Diana would watch them walk together and see Miles actually laughing at something Victor said. She didn't join them, kept her distance, let them build whatever it was they were building. But she watched, always watched. She was waiting for Victor to slip up, to miss a visit, to make an excuse, to show that this was all a performance, a temporary guilt trip that would fade as soon as something more interesting came along. He didn't slip up. 6 months in, Miles broke his wrist falling off the monkey bars at school. Diana got the call at work and rushed to the emergency room, terrified, berating herself for not being there when it happened. When she arrived, Victor was already in the waiting room. "How did you know?" she demanded. "I listed myself as an emergency contact at his school," Victor said. "After you said it was okay." "I hope that was." He trailed off at her expression. "They called me," Diana said. "You got here before me and they called me first. I was in the area, meeting with my lawyer actually. His office is 3 blocks from Miles's school. You're stalking us. I'm trying to be available." Victor's voice was quiet. "I know it looks bad. I just wanted to be close by in case something happened." Diana didn't know what to say. The old her would have seen this as creepy, controlling, another sign that Victor couldn't be trusted. But looking at his face, at the genuine worry in his eyes, she wasn't sure anymore. Miles came out of the examining room with his arm in a cast, high on painkillers and loopy with relief. "Mama," he spotted her and grinned. "I broke my arm. The doctor says it's going to heal super fast because I'm young." "I see that, baby. How do you feel?" "Great. The medicine is really good." Miles turned and noticed Victor. "Dad, you came, Dad." It was the first time he'd called Victor that, not to his face, not like it meant something. Victor's expression cracked, just for a moment, something raw and vulnerable showing through before he pulled himself together. "Of course I came." He crouched down to Miles's level. "How's the arm?" "It hurts, but not too bad. The doctor let me pick the color of my cast. I got blue because it's your favorite." Victor's eyes met Diana's over Miles's head. There was something in them that looked like gratitude, and wonder, and the beginning of something she didn't want to name. "That's great, buddy," Victor said softly. "Blue is a good choice." They drove home together. All 3 of them in Victor's car, Miles chattering the whole way about his adventure in the emergency room. It felt almost normal, almost like a family. Diana didn't know how to feel about that. Later that night, after Miles was asleep with his cast propped on a pillow, she sat on the fire escape and thought about everything that had changed. Victor had been showing up for 6 months. Not perfect. Still awkward sometimes, still learning how to be a father to a child he'd never known, but present, consistent, real. Maybe people could change. Maybe the man who had thrown her away like garbage really was becoming someone different. Or maybe this was just the long con, the slow manipulation, the setup before another devastating betrayal. She didn't know, couldn't know. The only way to find out was to keep watching, keep waiting, keep protecting her son while giving Victor the chance to prove himself. One day at a time, one visit at a time, one awkward family dinner at a time. That's how trust was built, not in grand gestures or tearful apologies, but in the small moments, the showing up, the being there, the choosing over and over again to do the right thing when nobody was forcing you to. Victor was learning that, and Diana, slowly, carefully, was learning to believe it. But this isn't the end of the story, not yet, because building trust is one thing, but keeping it, that's something else entirely. The call came on a Thursday evening 8 months after the wedding crash. Diana was making dinner, spaghetti from a box because it was cheap and Miles loved it, when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, telemarketers probably, or one of those scam calls about her car's extended warranty. But something made her answer. Ms. Mensah. The voice was crisp, professional, vaguely familiar. This is Patricia Holloway from Channel 7 News. I'm working on a story about Victor Ashford and the events surrounding his canceled wedding last September. I was hoping you might be willing to speak with us on camera. Diana's hand tightened on the phone. No, Ms. Mensah, I understand this is a sensitive situation, but the public has a right to know. The public doesn't have a right to anything about my son. And neither do you. We're going to run the story regardless. Wouldn't you rather have your side represented? Diana hung up without answering. Her hands were shaking. She stood at the stove, watching the water boil, trying to slow her breathing. She'd known this might happen. The video from the wedding had gone viral within hours, had been viewed millions of times, had spawned countless think pieces about billionaire accountability and secret children and the lies rich men told. But the attention had died down after a few weeks. People moved on to the next scandal. Diana had started to hope they'd been forgotten. Apparently not. She called Victor. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm in a way that still caught her off guard sometimes. Hey, everything okay? A reporter just called. Channel 7. They want to do a story about the wedding. Silence on the other end. Then a long exhale. I was afraid of this. What do you mean? I've been getting calls too. My publicist has been fielding requests for weeks. I told them to say no comment, but apparently that's not working. Diana felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to worry you. I thought it would blow over. Well, it didn't blow over. Now they're calling me at home. They have my number, Victor. That means they know where I live. I'll handle it. How? You can't make this go away. Once the media decides they want a story, they get their story. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. Maybe we should give them one. What? Not the story they want. Not the scandal and the drama and all that garbage. But our story, the real one, about what happened and what we're doing now. You want to go public? I want to control the narrative. If we stay quiet, they'll make up whatever sells the most clicks. But if we get ahead of it, if we tell the truth on our terms, maybe we can protect Miles from the worst of it. Diana thought about it. She hated the idea of putting her life on display, of letting strangers judge her choices and her son. But Victor had a point. The story was coming whether they liked it or not. I need to think about it, she said finally. Take all the time you need. But Diana, whatever you decide, I'm with you. All the way. She hung up and stood there in her kitchen, the pasta water boiling over onto the stove, her mind racing through possibilities she didn't want to consider. This was the problem with letting Victor into their lives. It wasn't just him anymore. It was his world, his money, his enemies, his spotlight. She'd known this was coming, had warned herself not to get comfortable, not to trust too quickly, not to let her guard down. But somewhere along the way, between the Sunday visits and the emergency room and the awkward family dinners, she'd started to believe that maybe things could be different, that maybe Victor really had changed, that maybe they could build something together without the past destroying it. Now the past was back, and it was hungry for blood. Miles appeared in the kitchen doorway, his blue cast covered in signatures from his classmates. Mama, is dinner ready? I'm starving. Diana forced a smile and turned off the stove. Almost, baby. Go wash your hands. She watched him run off toward the bathroom, this beautiful boy who had no idea that his life was about to get complicated again, who still believed, despite everything, that the world could be fair if you were brave enough to demand it. She would protect him, whatever it took, even if it meant going to war. The interview aired 3 weeks later. Diana had agreed to participate, but only on her terms. No ambush questions, no footage of Miles, no visits to their apartment or their neighborhood. Just her and Victor, sitting side by side in a neutral studio, telling their story to a reporter who had promised to be fair. She didn't trust the promise, but she trusted silence even less. The segment was 12 minutes long. Diana watched it alone after Miles went to bed, her hands clenched so tight her nails left marks on her palms. The reporter started with the wedding footage, of course, the viral moment. Miles walking down the aisle, Victor's face crumbling. All the drama that had made this story irresistible to millions of viewers. Then Diana's face appeared on screen. I was 29 years old when I found out I was pregnant. I was in love with a man I thought loved me back. I was wrong. Her voice was steady on the recording, steadier than she'd felt during the actual interview. When I told him about the baby, he denied it was his. He had me fired. He blacklisted me from my industry. He threatened to destroy me if I ever went public. The reporter asked about those years, the 3 jobs, the sleepless nights, the poverty that had forced her to choose between groceries and electricity. I did what I had to do, Diana said on screen. My son was never going to feel like he wasn't wanted. Even if his father didn't want him, I was going to love him enough for both of us. Then Victor appeared. He looked different than the wedding footage. Older, humbled, the polish gone from his voice. I was a coward. I let my fear of my father's disapproval and my obsession with my reputation destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. I told myself Diana was trying to trap me, that the baby wasn't really mine, that I was doing them a favor by walking away. But I was lying. I was just too scared to be the man they needed. The reporter asked about the wedding crash, how it felt to have his son confront him in front of 300 people. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Victor's voice cracked slightly. I know that sounds crazy, but Miles saved my life that day. He forced me to look at who I'd become and decide if I wanted to keep being that person. The segment ended with footage of Victor and Miles in the park walking together, Miles chattering about something while Victor listened with a small smile on his face. It's not perfect, Diana's voice said over the images. We're still figuring it out, but he's showing up, every week, every time Miles needs him. And I'm starting to believe that maybe people really can change. The screen faded to black. Diana sat in her dark living room for a long time, thinking about what she'd just seen. Her life, reduced to 12 minutes of television, her pain and her struggle and her hope, packaged for public consumption. She hated it. Hated being vulnerable in front of strangers. Hated knowing that millions of people were watching and judging and forming opinions about her choices. But she'd done it for Miles, so that when the story came out, as it inevitably would, he would see his parents standing together, telling the truth, taking responsibility. Maybe that was worth something. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victor. You were incredible. Thank you for doing this, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. She stared at the message for a while. Then she typed back, just don't make me regret it. His response came immediately. I won't, I promise. She wanted to believe him. That was the terrifying part. After everything, after all the lies and the betrayal and the years of struggling alone, some part of her still wanted to believe that this man could be better. Maybe that made her a fool, or maybe it just made her human. Either way, there was no going back now. The interview changed things, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small ways that Diana noticed. Like cracks spreading through ice. People recognized her now, on the subway, at the grocery store, walking Miles to school. Most of them were kind, offering smiles and nods of support. A few approached her with unsolicited advice or prying questions she deflected with practiced politeness. But there were others too, people who looked at her with suspicion or contempt, who whispered gold digger loud enough for her to hear, who assumed she was the villain of the story, no matter what the interview had said. She learned to ignore them, to keep her head up and her shoulders back and her eyes focused on wherever she was going. Miles noticed, though, kids at school had seen the interview, had heard their parents talking about it. Some of them teased him, others treated him differently, with a kind of curious distance, like he was a celebrity instead of just a normal 7-year-old. Does it bother you? Diana asked him one evening. The attention, Miles considered the question carefully, the way he did with everything important. Sometimes, But mostly I'm just glad people know the truth now. I got tired of pretending my dad didn't exist. You never have to pretend anymore." "I know." Miles looked at her with those brown eyes, so much wiser than his years. "Mama, do you think Dad's really changed, like for real?" Diana thought about the past 8 months. The weekly visits, the phone calls, the way Victor had shown up at the hospital when Miles broke his wrist, the interview where he'd confessed his failures to millions of strangers. "I think he's trying," she said honestly. "And that's more than he ever did before. But do you trust him?" The question cut straight to the heart of everything Diana had been wrestling with. "I'm learning to," she admitted. "It takes time, baby. When someone hurts you the way he hurt us, you can't just decide to trust them again. You have to watch, and wait, and see if they keep showing up even when it's hard." Miles nodded slowly. "I think I trust him. Not all the way yet, but more than I did before. That's okay. You get to decide how much you trust and when. Nobody else can make that choice for you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with its usual evening symphony of traffic and voices and distant music. "Mama," Miles asked eventually. "Yeah, baby, I'm glad I crashed the wedding, even if it was scary, even if everything got really crazy afterward. I'm glad I did it." Diana pulled him close and kissed the top of his head. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Victor's transformation continued in ways Diana hadn't expected. He quit Ashford Capital. Not dramatically, not in a blaze of headlines, just quietly stepped down from the CEO position he'd held for over a decade, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. Diana found out through the news before Victor had a chance to tell her. "What happened?" she demanded when he showed up for his regular Sunday visit. "I realized I hated it." Victor's voice was matter of fact. "I've hated it for years, actually. The board meetings and the shareholder calls and the constant pressure to make money for people who already have more than they could ever spend. I was good at it, but it was killing me. So you just walked away." "I walked toward something better." He looked at Miles, who was kicking a soccer ball around the park while they talked. "I want to be a father. A real one, not the kind who shows up for an hour on Sundays and then disappears back into his work. I want to be there for homework and baseball games and bad days and good days and everything in between." Diana studied him carefully, looking for the angle, the hidden agenda. "Your father must be furious. My father had another stroke last month. He's in a care facility now, barely recognizes his own name most days." Victor's voice was flat. "I spent my whole life trying to make him proud, trying to live up to his expectations. And in the end, none of it mattered. He doesn't even know who I am anymore." "I'm sorry. Don't be. It's freed me in a way. I finally get to decide who I want to be instead of who he wanted me to be." "And who do you want to be?" Victor was quiet for a moment, watching Miles score a goal against an imaginary opponent and throw his arms up in celebration. "I want to be the kind of man my son can be proud of," he said finally. "The kind of man who shows up, who keeps his promises, who puts people before profit and love before legacy." Diana felt something shift in her chest. She'd been waiting for Victor to reveal his true colors, to prove that all of this was just an elaborate performance. But month after month he kept showing up, kept changing, kept becoming someone she almost didn't recognize. "What are you going to do for money?" she asked, because the practical part of her brain couldn't help it. Victor smiled slightly. "I have enough to last several lifetimes, but that's not the point. I've been talking to some people about starting a foundation, clean energy for low-income communities, solar panels, home weatherization, the kind of stuff that actually helps people instead of just making rich people richer." That sounds like something the old Victor would never have done. The old Victor was an idiot. The old Victor thought success meant having the biggest office and the most impressive title. The old Victor died in that ballroom when his 7-year-old son showed more courage than he'd shown his entire life. Miles ran over, sweaty and grinning. "Dad, did you see my goal?" "I saw it, buddy. You're getting really good. Mom says I can try out for the school team next year. Will you come to my games?" Victor looked at Diana, asking permission with his eyes. She gave a small nod. "I'll be at every single one," Victor said. "Promise?" "Promise." Miles beamed and ran back to his imaginary soccer match. Diana and Victor sat in silence for a while, watching him play. "He's happy," Victor said quietly. "I never thought I'd get to see that." "My son happy. He's always been happy," Diana corrected. "Despite everything, he's always found reasons to smile. Because of you. Because you gave him everything I should have helped provide. Diana didn't argue, it was true. I'm not looking for gratitude, Victor, she said. I'm not looking for anything from you except what you're already giving Miles. Just keep showing up, that's all I want. What if I want to give more? She turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time in months. The desperation was gone from his face, replaced by something calmer, more settled. He looked like a man who had finally stopped running from himself. What do you mean? I mean us, Diana. You and me. I know I destroyed what we had. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But these past months, being around you, watching you with Miles, remembering why I fell in love with you in the first place. Victor, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm just being honest. You're the best person I've ever known. The strongest, the most loving, the most forgiving. And I'm still in love with you. I don't think I ever stopped. Diana's heart was pounding. She'd told herself she was over him, had built walls so high she thought nothing could scale them. But here he was, chipping away at her defenses with nothing but time and patience and genuine change. I can't think about that right now, she said. My focus is on Miles, on making sure he's okay, that this transition doesn't hurt him. I understand. Victor's voice was gentle. I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just telling you the truth so you know where I stand. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. That's a long time to wait for something that might never happen. I've got nothing but time. And honestly, even if you never feel the same way again, even if we never become anything more than Miles's parents, this, he gestured at the park, at Miles, at her. This is already more than I deserve. I'm grateful for every minute of it. Diana didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, just sat there in the autumn sunlight watching her son play, feeling the warmth of the man beside her. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but it was close. The year turned. Fall became winter, winter became spring. Miles turned 8 on a Saturday in March, the anniversary of the snowstorm that had brought him into the world. Diana made pancakes. Victor brought a homemade cake, slightly lopsided but covered in Miles's favorite blue frosting. They sang Happy Birthday together in Diana's small kitchen, the three of them crowded around a table that had never been meant to hold more than 2. Make a wish, Diana said as Miles leaned over the candles. He closed his eyes for a long moment, his face serious with concentration. Then he blew them all out in one breath. What did you wish for? Victor asked. Miles looked between them, his mother and his father, this family they'd built from wreckage and second chances. I can't tell you, he said, but I think it might already be coming true. After cake and presents and an elaborate adventure involving dinosaurs and spacecraft, and a pillow fort that took over the entire living room, Miles fell asleep on the couch, exhausted and happy. Diana and Victor cleaned up together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with an ease that hadn't existed a year ago. Thank you, Victor said quietly, for letting me be part of this. You don't have to keep thanking me. I know, but I want you to know that I don't take any of it for granted. Every moment with him, with you, it's a gift I never expected to receive. Diana set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. You've changed, she said. And I don't just mean the big stuff, quitting your job, starting the foundation. I mean you. The way you talk, the way you listen, the way you look at Miles like he's the most important thing in the universe. He is. Victor's voice was simple, certain. He's my son. My whole world looks different because of him. Diana felt the walls around her heart cracking, crumbling, falling away. Victor, you don't have to say anything. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. I meant what I said before. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just grateful to be here. And that's what finally broke her. Not the grand gestures, not the tearful apologies, not the interview or the foundation or any of the external changes he'd made. Just this. A man standing in her kitchen asking for nothing, grateful for everything. Come here, she said. He looked confused. What? Just come here. He stepped closer. Diana reached up and put her hand on his face, feeling the roughness of his jaw, the warmth of his skin. I don't know if I can love you again, she said quietly. I don't know if I can trust you completely or if I ever will. But I know you're trying, and I know Miles loves you, and I know I'm tired of being angry all the time, Diana. Shut up. I'm not done. He shut up. If we do this, whatever this is, we take it slow, one step at a time. You don't move in, you don't propose, you don't make any big dramatic gestures. We just keep doing what we're doing, showing up, being honest, building something real instead of something that looks good from the outside. Victor nodded, not trusting himself to speak. And if you hurt us again," Diana continued, her voice hardening, "if you disappear or lie or put yourself before Miles, I will walk away, and I will make sure he never sees you again. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good." She kissed him. It was brief, just a brush of lips, tentative and questioning. But when she pulled back, she saw tears in his eyes. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not. But you're getting a chance anyway. Don't waste it." "I won't. I swear to you, Diana, I won't." Outside, the March wind rattled the windows. Inside, Miles slept peacefully on the couch, dreaming whatever dreams 8-year-olds dream. And in the kitchen, two people who had hurt each other and healed each other began the slow, difficult work of building something new from the ashes of everything they'd lost. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was just two imperfect people choosing to try again. And sometimes that's enough. A year later, they got married. Not at the Plaza Hotel. Not with 300 guests and crystal chandeliers and a ceremony designed to impress. In Prospect Park, on a Saturday afternoon in June, surrounded by the people who actually mattered. Diana's mother, beaming in a yellow dress she'd bought special for the occasion. Miles, standing proudly as ring-bearer, his blue eyes brine with joy. Kesha, Diana's best friend since college, wiping tears and trying to pretend she wasn't. A handful of others who had been there through the hard years and were grateful to witness the good ones. Victor wore a simple gray suit instead of a designer tuxedo. Diana wore a white dress she'd found at a consignment shop, beautiful without being extravagant. The officiant was Kesha, who had gotten certified online specifically for this purpose. "We are gathered here today," she began, then had to stop because she was crying too hard to continue. Everyone laughed. Miles handed her a tissue from his pocket because he was prepared like that. "Sorry." Kesha wiped her eyes and started again. "We are gathered here today to witness the marriage of Diana Mensah and Victor Ashford. Which, let me tell you, is not something I ever thought I'd say out loud." More laughter. Victor ducked his head, embarrassed. Diana just smiled. "I've known Diana for 15 years, Kesha continued. "I was there when she got the job at Ashford Capital. I was there when she fell in love with a man who didn't deserve her. I was there when she showed up at my apartment pregnant and fired and convinced her life was over." Diana's eyes were wet now too. "And I was there when she rebuilt that life from nothing. When she worked 3 jobs and raised an incredible kid and never once complained about how hard it was, because that's who Diana is. The strongest person I've ever known." Kesha turned to Victor. "And you. I'm not going to lie, Victor. I wanted to hate you forever. After what you did, after the years Diana spent struggling while you lived in your penthouse, I thought you were irredeemable. But then you showed up, week after week, month after month, not trying to buy your way back in, not making excuses, just doing the work. And I realized something: people can change. Not everyone, not always. But sometimes, when someone wants it badly enough, when they're willing to put in the time and the effort and the patience, they can become someone completely different." Victor was crying now. He didn't try to hide it. "So here we are," Kesha said. 2 years after a 7-year-old boy walked down the aisle at a Plaza Hotel wedding and changed everything. 2 years of rebuilding and learning and growing, and today we get to celebrate what they've built together. She turned to Miles. "Do you have the rings, buddy?" Miles stepped forward, serious and proud, holding out the small pillow with 2 simple gold bands. Diana picked up Victor's ring first. "I didn't write vows," she admitted. "I tried, but every time I started it felt wrong, too small for everything I wanted to say." Victor nodded. "Me too. So I'm just going to say this." Diana took his hand. "I spent a lot of years being angry at you, and hurt and scared, but somewhere along the way I realized that holding on to all that pain was only hurting me. You've done the work, Victor. You've shown up over and over again, even when I made it hard, even when I pushed you away. You kept coming back." She slid the ring onto his finger. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll have more kids or where we'll live or what challenges we'll face. But I know this: I trust you, not because you earned it, but because you keep earning it every day. And I love you, not the man you used to be, but the man you've become." Victor was openly weeping now. He took her hand, his fingers trembling as he slid her ring into place. "I spent 35 years living the wrong life," he said, "chasing success that meant nothing, impressing people who didn't matter, hurting the only woman who ever saw me as a person instead of a brand. I was a coward and a fool, and I didn't deserve a second chance." He paused, looking at Miles, then back at Diana. "But you gave me one anyway. both of you. You let me into your lives even though I'd done nothing to earn it. You showed me what real love looks like, what family means, what it feels like to belong somewhere, not because of money or status, but just because someone cares about you." His voice cracked. "I love you, Diana. I love Miles. I love this little family we've built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. And I promise you, for whatever years I have left, I will spend every single one of them trying to be worthy of this moment." Kesha was crying again. So was Diana's mother. So was pretty much everyone except Miles, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "By the power vested in me by the internet," Kesha managed, "you may now kiss your bride." Victor kissed Diana. Miles cheered. The small crowd applauded. And somewhere out there in the vast, indifferent universe that had thrown them together and torn them apart and brought them back to each other, something shifted, a balance restored, a wrong made right, a family forged from fire. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected. It was better. That night, after the party wound down and the guests went home, Diana and Victor sat on the steps of their building while Miles slept inside. The city hummed around them, 8 million lives in progress, 8 million stories unfolding in real time. "So," Victor said, "we're married. Apparently. How does it feel?" Diana thought about it. Strange, good, terrifying, all of that at once. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted. "For something to go wrong. For you to change back into who you used to be." "I know." Victor squeezed her fingers. "And I don't blame you. You spent 7 years learning not to trust me. That doesn't go away overnight. But I do trust you." Diana looked at him. "That's the terrifying part. Despite everything, I actually believe you've changed." "I have, I know. That's what scares me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of summer just beginning. "Mama, Dad," they turned to find Miles standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "What are you doing up, buddy?" "Couldn't sleep, too excited." He padded over and squeezed between them on the steps, fitting into the space like he'd always belonged there. "Are you guys happy?" he asked. "Very happy," Diana said. "The happiest," Victor agreed. "Good." Miles yawned. "I wished for this, you know, on my birthday cake." "You're not supposed to tell people your wishes," Diana reminded him. "I know, but this one already came true, so I think it's okay." He leaned against Victor's side, his eyes already drooping closed again. Victor looked at Diana over their son's head. She saw everything in his eyes, love and gratitude and the kind of peace that only came from finally being exactly where you were supposed to be. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. "For what?" "For everything." She smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. The three of them sat there on the steps, watching the stars appear one by one above the Brooklyn skyline, listening to the city breathe around them. A family, forged from second chances, a love, rebuilt from ruins. A story that wasn't supposed to have a happy ending but somehow found one anyway. Because that's the thing about life. It doesn't follow the script. It surprises you. It breaks your heart, and then, if you're lucky, if you're brave enough to keep trying, it puts the pieces back together in ways you never expected. This is their story. A billionaire who lost everything and found himself. A woman who raised her son alone and learned to trust again. A 7-year-old boy who crashed a wedding and changed the world. Not perfect. Not a fairy tale, but real and true and theirs. The end. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever believed in second chances or fought for the family you deserved, leave a comment and let me know. And if you want to see more stories like this, stories about redemption and love and the courage it takes to rebuild what's broken, subscribe to this channel. Because every week we're telling stories that matter, stories that remind us why we keep fighting, why we keep hoping, why we keep believing that people can change and love can survive anything. Thank you for watching. Until next time.